Hello, and welcome.
To what?
To episode 72 of the Life in General podcast. My name is Nick.
I'm Ian. What's up, everybody?
That sounds like Ralph Wiggum.
I know.
Hello, everybody.
Actually, the other day,
Well, that was Dr. Nick. That was
the other day I was bored and I typed in Simpsons Ralph Wiggum and watched like a 5-minute clip of just nothing but Ralph Wiggum.
Some of them are really great.
Yeah,
My cat's breath smells like cat food.
right. They didn't have that one on there. They
Really?
also didn't have I Bet My Wookiee.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one, too.
So.
I also like Sleep. Ooh, that's where I'm a Viking.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't on there. It was a lot. Some of them I hadn't even heard before.
Oh, really? Do you remember any of them?
Oh God, well, not really.
Are you like the king of YouTube videos? Is that like all you do is watch?
I'm very lazy and very bored all the time. So yes, I watch YouTube videos a lot.
You're bored? If you're bored, you know what you could do?
Show
notes. Yes.
That's the second time this week you said that.
Yes. Show notes.
Yeah. I'm never that bored.
I know, you just leave it all up to me.
Well, you do such a good job. There's no point in me even attempting to try and match your level of excellence.
Yeah, whatever. So. Jackass. Just leave it all for me.
Hey. I carry my weight as far as, the conversation goes, no problem. So
yeah? Well, what would you like to talk about this week, Ian?
I'm wondering maybe we should talk about the Electoral College.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds like a really crappy topic.
It really does. It sounds like a topic that you and I might fight about. But let's give it a go anyway.
I don't know if we'll fight about it. We might have some
disagreement. Yes.
So,
I know we will because we've
discussed the Electoral College multiple times. And I will say this, as I have when we've discussed other things like episode 71 of the Life in General podcast, which you should go check out if you haven't already,
absolutely,
when we discussed presidential conspiracies. I'm going to try to kind of stay away from the political aspect of the Electoral College.
It's going to be a lot tougher with this one.
It's going to be a lot tougher with this one.
Yeah. Well, I think we can leave the partisan part of it aside and just discuss. We can discuss
what I mean.
The Electoral College on its own merits.
Yes, so. And that's what I meant by leaving the political side out. Right. Because everything's so polarized.
Yeah. I guess the only thing we'll get to it when we're talking. There is one little partisan issue that I would have with it. But beyond that, it'll come up.
No, just
that it does the Electoral College tends to benefit, at least as far as recent history goes, only one political party.
Well, I am going to get to that. Before I do that, though, if there's any questions or comments, you can email us at lifeingeneralpod.com, lifeingeneralpod@gmail.com. That's all I want to say. Check us out on Spotify and all that stuff. Podbean, iTunes.
We're as easy to find as herpes on a whore.
That's really disgusting.
I know.
That's really fucking disgusting. Because no one wants to find herpes on anybody.
You start talking like, what's easier to find than our podcast? Herpes on a whore.
Is it? I guess it's just
you just assume it's always there.
I mean, if you don't partake in horrors, it's not so easy to find.
Well, true,
right?
Yes, but if you are partaking in horrors, it's pretty easy to find. Much like podcasts. If you're not into podcasts, we're not very easy to find. But if you partake in our podcasts, we're pretty easy to find.
Podcasts are pretty easy to find nowadays. It seems like everyone and their brother has a podcast. It seems like.
Yeah.
I know 3 people that
horrors are probably pretty easy to find too because of the internet. They call them escorts online.
I would think that horrors would be harder to run into, though, like casually run into.
Outside of dirty inner cities.
Yeah, and I don't mean like, oops, I slipped and fell, my schmeckle fell in her. I mean like run into like.
Well, that's how I fuck horrors. It's accidental.
Yeah. So
the Electoral College. Oh well.
I don't know what the hell I was going to say now. You start talking about horrors and herpes and.
Yeah. Well, whatever. That's just when I think of horrors, I think of herpes.
So the original idea original premise behind the Electoral College is, and I think it's one of the cons kind of against it, is the original kind of premise. It's almost no longer relevant.
Right. So far, we're in complete agreement.
So in the Constitutional Convention in 1787, when they sat down to actually physically put together the Constitution, or what would become the Constitution, they kind of based the original drafting. They used the Virginia Plan, which was drafted by James Madison, as kind of the basis of discussion for the formation. And in the Virginia Plan, it actually called for Congress to be elected by so Congress would elect the president.
Much like the way the Parliament works in the UK.
Yes, yeah, that was the original plan behind it. And originally, a majority of the delegates agreed that was kind of the way that they were going to move forward. But after discussing the topic and what sounds like a lot of debate back and forth from each side, they kind of agreed that one of the main principles of the Constitution was this idea of a separation of powers.
Right. So
if Congress is directly electing the president, where's the separation? And that's the issue that they...
Well, I think the separation would come more from the party lines. One party that gets the majority gets to choose the president, but the other party is like the check and balance on that other party.
I see that. But so from what I understand from the writings and of the time and the people that were involved in the process, they felt that there was too much. It could potentially create an issue where Congress has more power than another
branch of the government. Right.
And so they kind of decided
to
amongst them,
it all.
To prevent prevent corruption in the process, that allocating votes to states equal to the number of representatives and senators, they felt was the best way to go forward. Because that was at a time where...
No, senators, each state has 2, so...
Correct.
How would the number of senators have any bearing on it?
So if your state has, let's say, because every state has 2 senators.
Right.
And let's say your state has 48 representatives, or whatever the number is. So let's say 48. Because there's some states that do. Very few of them, but I think California is the only one. California has 50 some electoral votes, right?
That sounds about right. I don't know the exact number.
So they got let's say 40. Let's say you got 48 in the House of Representatives and 2 senators. So you would have 50 electoral votes.
Okay.
So that's the way it's divvied up.
Right. Okay. So, okay, go on. I have questions, but
no.
Well, I'm just curious how that, because I, as it stands now, any representative is not necessarily legally obligated.
That's I
was wondering at the origin point, was that the case as well, or is that something that's happened over the course of time?
No, there are some states that have laws on the books. I believe it's roughly half, or right around there, have laws on the books that the electors have to place their votes to the candidate that wins the vote in the state.
Gotcha.
But there are quite a few states that have zero. There's no laws on the books to enforce that. So your state could vote for Hillary Clinton,
but our representatives
could say, you know what, screw that. We're not voting for her. We're going to put our votes to Donald Trump, which is something that's never happened.
Well, because it's all based on party lines too. But ultimately, you could have, say, theoretically, if there were 2 Democrats on the ballot, with, or 3, or 2 on each side, because even though we whittle it down to one on each side, that's not always going to be the case going forward, and it may not have. There may have, I don't know if there was historically any time where there was legitimately 3 people, or 4 people on the ballot.
I don't think so.
So, So I guess ultimately you're right, but anything's possible these days.
But there's also a push that I've seen in at least the last couple of elections. There's more interest in actually awarding electoral votes at the same percentage that a candidate receives votes as far as popular vote goes in their state.
Okay.
So if you get 52% of the popular vote, you would get 52% of the Electoral College votes for that state.
Okay. So if there was 100 votes,
which is kind of a hybrid system.
Right. So if your state had theoretically 100 electoral votes, and you got 52% of the vote, you get 52% of the electoral votes.
You would get 52 votes, and the other person would get 48.
Gotcha.
Or 46, and then one other candidate, the Green Party candidate, would get 2, and
or whatever they got.
Yes.
Yeah, so okay. That almost sounds fairer than the system we've got, but
and that's something that I guess I never really thought about, because I've always kind of been in favor of. I wouldn't say in favor of. I kind of understand why the Electoral College is in place.
I understand why it was initially in place. I do not see why it is now.
Today. But if they came out tomorrow and said it no longer exists, that they were doing away with it, it wouldn't really affect me.
I just think in this day and age, when you can get 2 million people to call in a vote for American Idol, I think we're in a place where every person, their voice can be heard. When it comes to population zones, you can't break down. You cannot take away the voice of one state and give it to another just because there's more people in the one state. You know what I mean?
But that's what you do kind of when you get rid of the Electoral College.
I guess to some degree, but it's a fairer system in the sense that it's majority rule.
I don't know if I'd say it's fair.
It's fair
because
it's as fair as majority rule. Majority rule isn't 100% fair either.
Because this is
because if you're in a room with 100 people and 60 of them want to eat the other 40, that's not fair. But it's going to end up happening to some degree. That's.
I look at it this way.
Majority rule is the fairest system that we could come up with, and yes, it's not 100% perfect, but I think it's better than giving more power to less people. You know what I mean?
The Electoral College almost ensures that every part of the country is equally represented.
But it doesn't work out that way. It works in the exact opposite.
I don't think it does. It does, because
if you
go strictly by popular vote, what state is California and let's say Maine equally represented, popular vote wise? If you have an election based strictly off popular vote,
we're not voting for California or Maine. They're voting for the unity, for the union. It has nothing to do with their individual.
But what
states.
I'm saying though is if you have an election strictly off of popular vote, you can take California, New York, Texas. If you win those 3 states alone, there's a very big push right there towards your total.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're basically not representing anyone in any of the other 47 states.
Theoretically, you're right.
And that's why I said even the flaws and some very large ones that I feel the Electoral College has, I still see it as allowing equal representation.
Right. I'm being more in favor of, like you pointed out, a hybrid system or a...
Yeah, the more I've read about that I've actually I lean towards that.
Or ultimately a just a different system, because the way it works now is it's the reverse. It's shifted the power. So instead, where you're saying all they need is 3 states, you're taking all the power away from 3 or 4 or the majority of the larger states and giving it all to these small states where there's a population of 1 million people.
Well, not even that.
And 1 million people now have more power or more vocal power than a state that has, 40 million.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the other point I was going to make against, because I've got points for and against the Electoral College.
Well, then we're not really going to argue too much because
the kind of one of the bigger issues I have with the Electoral College is almost the complete opposite of what I like about it. And that's the Electoral College gives almost too much power to, in recent elections, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and North Carolina.
Right. And I would say even Mississippi, Louisiana, which is a medium-sized state.
No, because those states are guaranteed to go a certain way.
Well,
Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida.
Because they're considered swing states.
Exactly.
But that's not necessarily universally always going to be true.
But they have been, at least in our lifetime.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. But
so, you take those states.
You could add Michigan to that list, too. Michigan's quickly becoming a swing state.
Michigan's not really, outside of this last presidential election, it's not really a swing state.
I think it will become
with very few exceptions. It has voted a certain way over the past 30, 40 years.
Right.
Okay. So like I said, it takes while the Electoral College may give equal representation per se to states, it also takes away and gives it to a smaller handful of states, because that Alabama's going to vote one way, Tennessee's going to vote one way, Kentucky, California, New York, Massachusetts. These are states that, so there's 50,
historically speaking,
there's 50 states, but that 43% of them, or 43 of them, are going to vote a certain way, and it's the 7 states that are kind of the toss up.
Right.
So that's kind of one of my points against it.
Right. But I mean, it's the same argument I'm making, just on a larger scale. I think. Yeah,
and that's why I touched on
it. You're right. It gives power, an overabundance of voice to swing states, or confusion in many cases. Ohio and Florida being
that's not an issue with the Electoral College. That's an issue with the idiots they're put in charge to run the elections.
Right. But I think if it was more straightforward, it would be a lot harder for those idiots to make mistakes.
Or if you just simply go to a paper ballot.
Yeah. Well, paper ballots are just as easy to corrupt, but there's a paper trail. That's the key.
Exactly. So there's no, systems going down right after the election and coming back up and vote totals being changed like that. And which happened in
Florida.
It happened in Ohio.
It happened in Florida
in
too,
2000.
Didn't it?
No, it happened in
Florida was the hanging chads.
Yeah. I believe it was 2000. It was 2000. No, it was 2004. That's what it was. Yeah, it was 2004. Vote totals were changed in Ohio in 2004.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing, and I guess this probably isn't a huge issue, but another thing that I have in favor of the Electoral College is it guarantees that every election is going to have an outcome. More like there's not going to be a tie.
No, but I don't really ever suspect there could be a tie. You're dealing with 400 million, and we'll say 35-40% of which actually vote.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at vote totals, I mean, we haven't had any that are like really freaking close.
Not in our
lifetime. But there have been some that have been closer than you think there would be with the amount of people voting.
Wasn't Gore v. Bush? Wasn't that pretty close?
I think
Gore got
by 1 million votes. I want to say
that's pretty close.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, that's. I'd say that's within the margin of
but
recount anyway.
Kind of going back to my first point in favor of the Electoral College, Hillary Clinton won the electoral vote by 3 or 4 million.
3 million. Three is conservative, but I think that's pretty accurate.
But if you take out California, she won by less than 1 million votes.
California's a big state.
I know that, but that's what I'm saying.
But she still won. You take California, you take that big blue state out.
Yes.
She still won the popular vote.
But you see how...
And we still have Donald Trump. You see my point. That's the problem with it.
No. But that's what I'm saying, though, is the issue I have with a popular vote is you can take one state away, and look what it does to the numbers.
Yeah, it takes out 2 million, but she still won. Without it.
Yeah.
Without it, she still won.
She still lost.
No, she
lost the election.
She lost the election based on the Electoral College.
Yes.
But popular vote is what we're talking about right now. And if you take out that big state that everyone is afraid of, the one that the Electoral College is meant to protect the small states from, you take that out and she still wins, yet she still doesn't become president. That right there is 100% the flaw in the system.
No, and I don't feel that way.
Because that's what it is. That's what the Electoral College is doing. It's protecting a small state like Alabama from a big state like California.
Or a small state like Illinois. Or a small state like Rhode Island. Or Maine.
Still. But if you take that big state, that big scary state out of the equation, and she still wins,
well, I mean,
because of the system that's
you can replace California with Texas. They've got
but she wouldn't have won Texas.
Similar-ish. But that's what I'm saying, though, is I wonder, and I hear this push on the left. I hear this push, but I wonder how much of a push there would be if in 20 years, let's say there's a mass exodus from California, and all of a sudden it's Texas that's the big player,
right? Well, I was just
or Alabama.
Ask.
So if any Republican president could win 3 states and be really freaking close to winning the election, I wonder how much of a push there would be to get rid of the Electoral College.
Well,
I don't think there would.
I don't know. I guess my argument is slightly partisan because my side keeps losing, yet they're winning the popular vote
twice
in a 40-year span. That's my lifespan.
Yeah.
And in that 40-year lifespan, we've had 2 massive recessions, one being very close to a depression, all under Republican rule. And I'm getting partisan here. One of which would have been potentially prevented by the Electoral College giving the vote to the person who actually won the popular vote. We could have potentially avoided wars had the election gone to the popular vote. You and I have both on many occasions say elections have consequences.
They do.
And we want to put the consequences in the hands of people who are not majority rule being elected in a truly democratic way. And it's obvious that one party seems to benefit from it, and one party also seems to be holding the reins of our government when this bad shit happens. It stands to reason that we maybe need to fix the fucking system.
Well, see, but this is kind of what I'm saying is I think that you and people on the left are pointing their finger in the wrong direction.
I'm not pointing my finger at anything.
Well,
I'm saying the system needs to be fucking fixed.
But my issue, and I think would have a bigger, more impactful end to it all, would be to fight against voter suppression.
Oh, that's a huge part of it too.
Because in 2000, it had 2 million people, but not been knocked off the voting rolls in Florida. There might have been a very different outcome to the 2000 election.
And again, I point out who have we found to be more responsible for voter? Well, who is responsible for voter suppression
or voter fraud
or voter fraud? Which side tends to be the one guilty of that?
I know
the side that benefits from the corruption, the side that benefits from the non-majority rule way of government.
Yeah.
So you see why I have a problem with it.
But what I'm saying,
as
though,
someone on the other side
is if you can get rid of voter suppression and when I say voter fraud, I mean fraud being committed against the voting system by politicians,
right?
Knocking people off voting rolls for no reason at all,
and then arguably even changing voter days, restricting voter days,
yes,
that kind of thing.
I think that has more of an impact on elections than the Electoral College.
I think it has a huge impact. I don't know if it's more, but I can't deny that you're right. It has a huge impact.
Because if things were different and everyone that went to voting booths in 2016 were able to vote, and I'm not saying double voting or voting under dead people's names, just voting.
Legally voting, yes.
Because so Chris Kobach, is it Kobach or Kobach?
I think it's Kobach, I think.
He had this whole voter suppression thing that was planned under, that was put in place under, I don't remember what state it was. It was Kansas. It doesn't matter. But he put the system together where what they would do is they cross-match your name with people that are voted or registered to vote in other states. And if you had similar names, addresses, dates of birth, you were automatically kicked off. You weren't notified. You'd show up to vote.
Let's say you're not on the list.
They would take your vote. But if you didn't have anywhere to prove that you are legally allowed to vote in that state, your vote wouldn't count.
Huh.
I guess the other thing, the other thing is, I think I've said for a long time, I feel like we need to have a voter ID in the United States.
Yeah. Well, that's very other side. I'm not.
No, it's not, because
I'm not disagreeing, but I don't know how it is in other states. Here in Michigan, you register to vote, you get a voter registration card.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that and you have your own ID, what difference does it make? They don't even ask for your voter registration card anymore. They didn't ask me.
No, they didn't.
I had to show my driver's license.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that don't have an ID.
But that's my point. You get a voter registration card if you register to vote.
But what I'm saying,
so put our picture on it, and it's done.
That's what I'm saying, and then that's what it'd be. I'm in favor of them doing a free national voter ID card.
Right. Because it is free. You don't have to pay for it. You just go into the Secretary of State, say,
no,
I want to register
you don't even need to do that. You can have a mobile unit that goes through neighborhoods,
right,
and does IDs. I mean,
I guess the question then becomes, how do you prove that someone is a citizen or a resident of that area without ID?
The same way you do now. You can't just like walk into a Secretary of State and say, my name is John Smith, and get a ID and get a voter card. You can't register to vote. You can't. You got to show proof of where you live, some kind of identification, birth certificate, something.
Right. The birth certificate's not going to show where you live. It'll show who you are.
No, it'll show who you are.
Yeah.
You know, and there are multiple ways to verify who you are. And like I said, the big argument against voter ID is one, forcing people to pay for it, and two,
well, yeah, it never. No,
so it would have to be free.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when the right talks about voter ID, it's never
free.
It's never free, because nothing's free,
especially for Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, their shit's free,
and the other issue is access to it. There's a lot of people that aren't able to drive. Right.
Well, in their cities, they got their voter booth, their polling station is 30 miles away, and they're old and don't own a car or not legally even allowed to drive. They got to take a bus. It's a mess. I agree. I think that would cure a huge problem of it. But again, typically, the side that's mostly suppressed is the side that keeps losing as a result of the Electoral College, even though they're gaining the popular vote. So you change that. You make voting easier. You're giving, theoretically, an advantage to that side that you say was going to win on 3 states anyway. Because we know how the country votes, and we know how these people who are being suppressed tend to vote.
Well,
so you're still giving if you eliminate voter suppression, there'd be no point for the Electoral College anyway, because it's gonna go in the favor of that one side anyway.
But what I talk about is when I say making every part of the country equally responsible or giving equal coverage to every state is, let's say you're running for president and you're a Democrat. Are you going to campaign in Alabama? Are you going to go to Florida?
You're right. No, that's the one area where I do see a slight necessity for something similar to the Electoral College. Because you're right. A Democrat is going to win California. They're going to win New York.
Yeah.
And theoretically, they're going to win at least 2 or 3 other bigger states.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. A Democrat probably has a straight majority. They probably have the slight advantage, which means they'd have no reason to even give a shit what happens in Alabama.
Yeah.
Or any of those states that are not going to vote.
That's kind of how Hillary Clinton ran her 2016 campaign.
Yeah, she did that with the Electoral College. Yeah. So, I mean, granted, she probably should have still won, but you're right. That was a bad campaign anyway.
Yeah, it was.
She shouldn't have been the nominee.
No.
But again, thank you, Nancy Pelosi. That's the reason she was. So, regardless of that, I actually kind of forgot where I was going with that, but there was, I was agreeing with you that, there'd be no reason to campaign.
No.
But that's the one area I'll concede that an Electoral College type system is necessary. But I mean, you could argue that if you just went straight majority on states, so like, as it stands now, you have X amount of electoral votes. Whoever gets the most votes wins that state, and that state goes for that candidate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So by that standard, that creates the exact same phenomenon with those other states. Why do Republicans have to? Because I mean, in this we're talking. Unfortunately, it goes to partisan politics, but Republicans don't have to campaign in California. But why should they give a shit about very little?
The way the system works right now, they have to, and this is why.
But they don't. They don't really care.
But they do, because this is what happens. Let's say the Electoral College is gone tomorrow. The 2020 election happens. And let's say, because I was one of these people. I was a Democrat living in very red state, yes. Very red Tennessee. Why? I mean, if a Democratic candidate knows they're not going to win Tennessee, and they don't go to their campaign, how much of the Democratic electorate in Tennessee is disenfranchised by it? And how much does that hurt Democrats down the ballot in that state? In smaller, maybe in some areas, more powerful local elections.
Well, I would say that most parties are going to rely on the diehards of their base anyway. You put me in Tennessee, I'm never going to vote Republican, regardless of what the Democratic candidates do. I just won't. I considered myself an independent voter for a short period of time, but that was ruined, and it started with the obvious flaws in the Electoral College in 2000. That is when I started realizing that the system is not properly functioning.
Okay.
As far as how our elections are handled. And as a result, we got a president who was Republican and gave me every indication why I should never vote for Republican. And it's only intensified since.
Okay.
So I'll never vote Republican.
But there's
my point is that you put me in that red state and the Democratic candidate never comes to Tennessee, it's not going to change my vote. And I don't think the Republican vote is going to change in those other states.
Are you sure? It's not going to change your vote. What it might do? It might keep you home.
It wouldn't keep me home. I mean, you're right. If I was a normal American,
because
it would keep me home. It would never keep me home.
I remember going to elections and I'd go to vote. And you look down the ballot, and you're like, all right, well, out of the 15 different people I'm voting for or positions I'm voting for, there's 2 Democrats.
Right.
I mean, I can see how something like that, or the complete opposite of that, in a state like California and New York, could very easily disenfranchise Republican or Democratic voters.
And I would say pre-21st century, that is a huge problem. But we're in an age now where information is available. I mean,
is information available?
It should be.
Is reliable information available?
I guess that's the big question. But
And that's why
if you're willing to look for it, if you're willing to put the effort in, as you've always had to do anyway,
but you
can find the reliable information.
People generally don't have the time or interest anymore.
Well, I think they have the time.
No. A lot of people don't.
I'm kidding. Everyone has time.
Yeah, do they?
How many people do you think are going to watch the Game of Thrones finale? People have fucking time.
Okay.
They just don't prioritize, and I'm guilty of that 100% myself. I have enough time. I could do anything.
Yeah.
Because
like edit a podcast.
Edit a podcast, exactly. I could edit 10 podcasts in a week with the free time I have, but I don't because I don't prioritize my time. That is the truth for the vast majority of Americans. Yes, okay. There are Americans who have 10 times more on their plate than I do, and really theoretically don't have any time. But they're also not like watching Game of Thrones. Their time,
maybe
what little time they have, they're not spending doing things like that. If you have an hour to spare to watch Game of Thrones, you have an hour to spare somewhere else in the week where you can find a newspaper or find a reliable website that has information.
That's the key word.
It's drive.
It's the reliable aspect of it.
True. That makes it a little harder. But instead of doing that or spending 5 minutes on Facebook,
it's getting to the point where I think it's getting harder and harder to find.
And that may be true, but it's there. If people put in as much effort on that as they do on their social media efforts and their TV watching, and like I said, I'm not judging because I am just as guilty.
A lot of that I think is probably escapism too.
Oh, it is. It is. I'm not challenging that. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. I'm just saying to say they don't have the time is false.
Well, I'm not saying they
don't have the energy.
I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have time to do it. I'm just saying there are some people out there that don't.
The vast majority of people have the time. They don't have the drive. The interest, yes. Yeah. But that's how you get abortion laws like we're getting, because people don't have the interest. Because people for the last 10 years have been saying they'll never overturn Roe v. Wade. You even said it today. You said it still won't. We don't know that.
I didn't say that. What I said is it's not going to get overturned with the laws that are currently being passed.
Right, but this is the steps.
It's called a long play.
It's called It's
called a long
slow
play.
Moving. They would call it a coup.
No,
or whatever.
It's a long play. You're playing chess while the other side is playing checkers.
Right.
You're thinking you're doing something now that's going to set up something later, that's going to set up something after that eventually is going to get.
But that's how they get us. That's how these things happen.
I don't know how we got on this subject from the Electoral College, but
because of consequences. It's all about consequences. And you pointed out about information. I was using that as in this day and age. I said information is available on where candidates stand, at least as far as that goes. In 2018, I went to every candidate that was on my ballot. I went to every one of their websites.
Okay.
Then I went to the opposing websites. I mean, I looked at every website to see what side was what their platform was.
But that
took me 3 hours.
In states where there isn't a national push from a national candidate, you tend to have fewer options. You would go, like I said before, you sit down and look at your ballot, and there wouldn't be two sides to look at. Right. There's only one side to look at. And why? Because there isn't a push from the national committee or the national party for candidates to step up.
But you're saying that in a world where the Electoral College exists. And you're using the Electoral College as a way to prevent that, but it's already existing within the realm of what you're talking about. So the Electoral College obviously isn't the cure for that.
No. What I'm saying, though, is if you get rid of the Electoral College, it would make it even worse.
Perhaps, but that's not the point. Shouldn't be.
And that's why I said at the top, I'm actually in favor of a hybrid system,
right?
And not the Electoral College or getting rid of it.
Yeah, well, I'd be okay with getting rid of it, I guess, but then again, it would probably benefit me. But that's because the vast majority of this country agrees with most of what I agree with.
Oh, I wouldn't say a vast majority.
I would say
a majority.
If you pull the majority,
I wouldn't say vast majority, but
I would say it's a bigger majority than.
When you say vast majority,
it's a bigger majority than what Hillary Clinton won on.
When you say vast majority, you would typically think like 75%, and the numbers aren't there.
No, but it's higher than it's closer to 60
now,
or 65.
Now, in favor of in argument against the Electoral College, probably the biggest issue I have with it is it promotes and keeps a two-party political system.
Yes,
because it suppresses any kind of third
party.
Third
party, the third parties don't have the electoral votes.
So if you had an election based off of popular vote, you would have more choices.
Right.
You would have more people step up from other parties,
which could solve that problem of certain states having a greater voice.
Possibly,
if you stretch out that, if you now throw in a third or even potentially a fourth candidate.
I've said for a long time it should be 5, minimum 5.
Yeah, you don't want to overcomplicate it either.
No,
personally,
far right, far left, moderate right, moderate left, and centrist. Ideologically speaking.
Yeah, how do you quantify that? That's the problem.
But what I'm saying though is, if you had a spectrum of candidates in that realm,
you'd almost have to have government created parties.
No, what I'm saying though is, if you have candidates step up there somewhere in that spectrum, you would generally have somebody that would speak to everyone across the country.
Yeah, well, then what would be the point?
At some
just
point.
Vote for the centrist every time.
No, I don't know if they would.
Yeah, well, no, they probably wouldn't, but that would be the logical thing to do.
But if you're a centrist and there's a centrist candidate, you're going to vote for that. If there's a far right candidate, you're probably going to vote for that one if that's what you lean. That's all I'm saying. Is
I have a feeling that the extremes would probably never win, which would be a good thing, I suppose, but there'd be no point in having those parties. They wouldn't get enough votes to even justify being there.
They would get more votes than they get now.
The extreme? Or are you talking about just the fringe parties?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, but that in itself, like I said, even if you extend it to 3, just to 3 or 4, rather than 5 or more, you're still spreading the vote out. So the candidates would still have to campaign in as many states as possible.
Absolutely, and
it would eliminate that unfairness that comes from population volume. There you go. You don't need the Electoral College, and it's still majority rule.
But the other thing is, I guess looking at it that way, something that's in favor of the Electoral College is, if you got rid of the Electoral College, and let's say you had 3 or 4 candidates, how much more expensive is an election?
I don't see how it would be any more expensive than what it already is.
So if you're going off an election that's strictly popular vote, how many of the 50 states do you get to campaign in?
All of them.
Okay. How many do they campaign in now?
There should be campaigning in all of them, right?
No, they don't. They don't.
That's their fault. Then if they don't want to, they don't want to.
Okay. But if you're not someone that's tied into a major political party, and you're trying to win, if you're like, look, I want to run for president. How do you get into that race if you've got a campaign across 50 states and fight against multiple other candidates instead of one candidate?
Well, what's the difference between that and the primaries in the first place? We've got we're up to 25 Democrats in the campaign right now.
Yeah, but how many?
Someone just announced today. I forgot who.
After the second one, a third of them be gone.
Oh, I have a feeling more than half of them will be gone after the first.
That's what I'm saying.
But I mean, that doesn't mean that they don't have to start campaigning now in every state.
But what I'm saying, so the only thing I'm saying is, how much more expensive is a presidential election?
Well, the expense, first of all, shouldn't play into it. I don't like the way that money does play into it. I understand why it does. No, because that's just the nature of the beast.
Well, I've said for a long time, you should get every presidential election should be publicly funded. You get X amount of dollars, and that's what you get for your campaign.
Right. And I agree with that. And that would solve that problem there, too.
It would. But that's never going to happen.
But the argument then becomes, who do you, obviously that comes from tax money. And where does that come from?
Yeah.
And depending on who's in power, if that's a law that every candidate gets X amount of dollars, and the budget is tight. Where do they pull that from? They don't pull it from areas where they can,
and that's why I said that'll never get passed. But
I mean, I'm just like I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate there for a second because I agree with you that should be the way it is, because it gets all the dirty money out of politics.
It does.
But if it's a matter of doing that and them cutting, school programs or health programs for the poor, or instead of saying, "Oh, our military budget is overinflated by 600%," let's take 100% of that 600%. That's take a sixth of that and funnel it into the campaigning. They will never do that.
No.
They'll cut the school programs. They won't,
because that's always the easiest thing to do.
But it's not it's the stupidest thing to do.
I know, but things like school funding has always been something that. You're right. It should be increased.
I didn't say school funding. I said school programs.
Well, it's the same. I mean, it's all funding.
Yeah. Because that goes to school lunches. That goes to extracurriculars. I don't know. I think you and I are agreement on the vast majority of things. I think you're trying to take a scalpel to something that I think requires a chainsaw. I might be over exaggerating by saying it needs a chainsaw, and it might need just a hunting knife.
And that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, I think that if there was a more of a proportional distribution of electoral votes per state, I think that would probably. It would almost be like a popular vote,
right?
But still keeping the electoral college system, if that makes sense.
I think the whole system needs to be revamped or gotten rid of, and I'm willing to accept a revamping. Yeah, I wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have been a couple years ago.
I don't see us ever getting rid of the electoral college.
Yeah,
not in our lifetime, at least.
Well, I don't.
Now, granted, we're getting closer to the end of our lifetime, but at least you are. You old bastard.
Right. I'm a year and a half closer to my death than you are, I suppose.
You're probably closer than that.
Yeah, probably. I could die tomorrow for all I know. But then again, so could you.
Yeah, sure, so could I. My wife might kill me tomorrow.
I'm just waiting. I know it's coming. It'll happen eventually.
Whatever. I don't know. It's the electoral college has always been kind of it's something that's kind of interesting me.
Area. It is a gray area, and I guess from a perspective of a time when nothing was electric and everything was mail and it had to be transported, and I get that, and you got these far off areas where it
would take weeks to get
Farmer Joe, who is going to suffer from more decisions that a government might make because he's a farmer, and foodstuffs are, the price of food is variant and everything, over a banker in New York. I get it. I get wanting to help and balance that out, but we've passed that. We really have. We've gone past that. That's no longer the case, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think we have the infrastructure. Whether or not it's exactly majority rule or, like you said, a hybrid of something, we have the resources to do something with this antiquated system.
Yeah, and I don't know.
An antiquated system that tends to benefit one side.
I wouldn't say it tends
over the other.
It has
in our lifetime, as you pointed out.
Twice in our lifetime.
Twice. Actually, not even twice in our lifetime. Twice in 20 years.
Okay.
Less than 20
but
years.
That doesn't necessarily. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't really mean that the system has to change because it happened twice.
No, but what it does say,
it doesn't create a pattern.
It's a pattern enough, and if you look at it, both those times, it gave the presidency to the person who lost the popular vote, which means that you can pinpoint that one set of values is held by a larger percentage of this country than another set of values.
No.
Yes.
No, what I would say that what the 2000 and 2016 elections proved was if you...
Arguably, you could say it 3 times, because in 2004 the same thing happened. Bush did get the popular vote, but not by much.
Yeah, but
you could argue that it had more to do with voter suppression.
But in 2000 and 2016, it had more to do with voter suppression in key states, in really one key state in each election that swung the election.
Right.
So it really has nothing to do with popular vote or electoral college. It has more to do with voter suppression.
But my point is that if one candidate got the popular vote but did not become president, it does show that more people wanted that value, those values of that candidate over the values of another candidate. And in both cases, it was the same side that...
Arguably, but maybe not really.
I guess
that could be mirage thinking.
You could say, right, I was going to say, you could say that's slight hyperbole to a degree. But if you look at the policies that our side, my side, that I can only argue from my own personal views, the policies and direction that I think the country should go in. If you look at all the polling and the way that people tend to vote nationally on these national elections in terms of majority, because again, that's all you can look at too. The values that I hold, the directions I think that the country should be going in, are shared by the majority, whether it's a
slight majority.
It might be a slight majority, but still the majority. And if you compile that all together, the other side has less majority, and they don't go with the majority. They don't even follow the majority when it comes to exercising policy. Once they become the leader, the president or whatever, their job is not to just function as their base. As the voice of their
don't
base.
think either side really does that.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
You don't think that the Republicans get into office and ignore all the polling data and focus strictly on Republican policy?
I would say Democrats, I mean, maybe not quite do the same, but they do to a certain level.
If they did, Obama would have given us universal health care. The banks would have been broken up. The wars would have been over if that were the case. That is not the case. Democrats typically follow a centrist line, whereas Republicans tend to go strictly with their party line.
I would say that
on policies.
I'm not saying that Democrats always do it, but Democrats do
on some things, maybe,
yes,
but not to the same level.
No, well, that's not what I'm saying.
Nowhere near the same level.
No, that's not what I said.
I mean, you can't equate the two. There is not one thing that the Trump administration has done that's bipartisan that I can think of offhand. Can you?
If I sat here long enough, I probably could.
I think there's there might be 2 specific things that he's done that could arguably be considered bipartisan, but everything else has been strictly Republican line.
That's not true.
Yes.
That's not true.
Then give me an example. Because
tariffs are definitely not fucking Republican Party line.
They're not Democrat either.
Yes, they are.
To that extent?
Yes.
Trade wars are Democrat?
Not trade wars. What President Trump has done with tariffs is basically Bernie Sanders' idea from the 2016 election.
I can't see him going to that extreme.
I heard him talk on the radio several times about it.
Yeah, okay, I'll go with that because yes, I do see that. But not to that.
Because that was the first thing that popped in my head. That's one major area where this president has veered very far away from his party,
right?
And potentially could be very huge. Especially, Walmart just announced today that they're raising a bunch of prices on stuff because, of course,
which is stupid because. The price of the products they have in the store aren't affected by it. It's the price that's coming down. It's like gas. Something happens and it doesn't really affect the gas that's already been purchased.
No.
But that price goes up anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. I think Walmart's just gouging at that point.
I mean, to a certain extent, I'm sure they are. To another extent, they're also raising prices, seeing that prices are going up.
They're going to go
months,
up anyway. Yeah.
So they're going to put the extra capital in reserve, knowing that they're going to have to purchase those higher priced products before they're able to sell them.
But that's taking into account that we can trust any corporation to not do that now. Raise the price. Oh, well, the prices are going to go up now in the preparation, but then when that happens,
they
raise
them up
again.
Yeah. Which would more likely.
Well, it creates artificial inflation by doing that.
It does,
and that hurts the economy.
But then again, that also hurts sitting presidents. Also,
well, we can only hope. But I don't want the economy to crash just to get rid of Trump.
No,
it's like burning down your house to get rid of a mouse,
or hoping that the pilot crashes the airplane that you're on.
Right, just to for whatever small reason. It's like I said, it's the nuclear option, and it's not a good one. And I think, as I said about the Electoral College, I mean, you're suggesting a scalpel, I'm suggesting a chainsaw. I think there's something in the middle between the two of us.
But the funny thing is, there's not a push from either side to do anything about it.
No, because it's status quo. It's status quo.
Because both sides are benefiting.
Yeah, I don't see how the Democrats are, but I know they are.
Hell yeah, they are. Personally, they're benefiting from whoever's in power on the Democratic side is absolutely benefiting from it.
From the lobbyists, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's Nancy Pelosi. She's
owned,
or
she's all across the board.
I mean, she is fucking owned by the lobbyists, the banks especially,
I would say,
and the insurance companies.
I would say more than half of one political party is owned by lobbyists, and 90+% of another party is. You can use your imagination on which side I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
So I mean, I guess
even the percentages that aren't owned by lobbyists are still rented by lobbyists
or want to be owned by.
Right. Yeah.
I'd say haven't been given the opportunity to be owned by.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a nicer way to say rented by lobbyists.
Yeah. So
every politician has some lobbyist money in their pocket.
The Electoral College, like I said, it's always something that's interested me.
Yeah.
And it's something that, I definitely see both sides of this. Like I said, if they announced tomorrow that it was gone, I wouldn't have an issue with it.
Right. Well, like I said, I just think that there's, in this day and age, with all the technology we have, we can come up with a fairer system.
But
that is truly in tune with the democratic process being majority rule.
But generally, technology
it's corruptible too. It's corruptible. I get that, but it's like anything else, and I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here to another topic. It's like guns. You take them away, the bad guys will still get them. They just have less option to get them, So you with computers, there are firewalls you can put in place. There are other technologies that can protect the technologies.
Yeah, but like at least the vast majority of the electronic machines that we have in our election system now are created by one company.
Well, that and like most technology, after a year or two, it's out of date. So now you got to spend a lot more money to update everything every 2 to 4 years.
Yeah. I don't know. There's got to be a better way to do this.
There is. We just haven't found it yet,
or found the political will to.
Do you want to know what the real solution is? Break up the union.
Just you mean let the South secede?
Just break up the union. Every state for themselves.
That's kind of how it was originally.
Yeah, I mean, just go
the colonies.
Yeah, just go that way. We can have a United Nations type
trade agreement,
and non-aggression pacts, so that no two states go to war. But just let every fucking state. At the very least, it'll get rid. I just want to get. I don't like the idea that I live in a country associated with Alabama.
There's some good parts of Alabama.
Yeah, the border's when you're leaving it.
There's nice people on both sides.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'm sorry. And really, the abortion is just the final straw. Any state that was willing to almost vote in a fucking pedophile to office, knowing he was a pedophile, I've lost all respect.
I wouldn't say knowing.
They fucking knew it. He goddamn acknowledged it.
It's highly likely.
He acknowledged that he had a relationship. He just he pointed out that he didn't see it as
because
sexual, even though he's a fucking pedophile. I don't care what anyone says. He's a goddamn pedophile, and he almost won. And he stands a chance of winning again.
I would look at it this way. I would say that, and I was not in favor of him by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't want my statement to make it sound that way, but I would say that there is probably a lot of people in our families, maybe not necessarily our grandparents, but people we know that could be classified as pedophiles also.
If you look at, say, maybe
because at one point
300 years ago?
No. Within this century. Well, not this century, but the past 100 years.
You have to explain that statement because I don't see it.
Even in the early parts of the 1900s, it was still perfectly normal for people to marry people, for older people, maybe not like really older, but
like him,
people in their 20s to marry 14-year-olds.
Right. He was in his 50s and she was in her teens.
Okay.
It's fucking pedophilia. I'm sorry. I'm not going to excuse it. And did he marry her?
No.
There you go. He's a fucking pedophile. He'd still be a pedophile if he married her, but legally you can't argue that, I guess. But on moral grounds, especially a state that claims to be a godly state.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, but then again,
I wouldn't want to. I just don't want. I don't want to bash everyone in Alabama because there is opposition in Alabama. They just need to get, I think, more resources from the national parties to.
I just think it says a lot about a population where that doesn't dissuade a portion of them.
No,
because in a rational society, he shouldn't even have been allowed to be on the fucking ballot.
Because it's that tribal mentality.
Tribes still have fucking criminals. They still, their own people, they would cast them out or kill them or whatever. Tribes didn't let bad apples stick around.
But look, that's another thing, kind of like, and I really don't want to go off on a too far.
I know we've already gone off farther than I wanted
to. And that's why I always said that if I ever ran for office, I'd run as an independent because I fucking hate party politics.
Well, because the system's designed not to let you.
I know that. But party politics is why there's a divide and why there is that tribal mentality.
I think
you get rid of parties. I don't think you don't have that problem. You don't have a guy like that gets nominated for an election.
But the problem is it's very difficult. It's kind of like having going to a sporting event and everyone's wearing the same jersey,
or not knowing where anyone sits.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that there has to be some defining characteristics, but
let that be their positions.
True, but again, we're dealing with people who can't find enough time in a week to read a fucking newspaper.
No, they're busy watching Honey Boo Boo reruns.
Right, yeah. So for whatever it's worth, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think there's nothing wrong with having a party, but I think as you pointed out earlier, it'd be nice if there was other options other than just red and blue.
Yeah.
Because
I think it hurts the system overall.
Well, it's created a mess. If there's only two sides, there's no compromise. You find it difficult to find the middle ground, the balance.
I'm really interested to see where all this ends. Like where it all, because I
don't know if you heard, but they're talking about a possible war with Iran. So
I'm assuming, and it's very likely that nothing changes, and for the rest of our lives,
it'll just be this.
It'll be this is how it's going to be, and possibly progressively getting worse.
Do you want to know the sad thing? I think that's the best case scenario.
Really? Mm-hmm. Anarchy in 150 years?
I don't see it. No, well, I mean, we'll be dead. You were just speaking from our lifetime.
Yeah. I'll still be alive in 150 years. I'm going to live forever.
You're going to live for...
Anyway. You know what the solution to all this is? Just make me king. I can fix it all. You'd have to make me king, though.
Yeah, well, okay.
And you have to make sure I don't get assassinated in the first 10 minutes.
Well, I can't make any promises that I wouldn't assassinate you in the first 5. And I'm your friend. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you could, actually. Even if that strange, fantastical thing happened, I do not think that you could fix it all.
I think I could fix a lot of it.
You could fix a lot of it, but you'd have to fix some of it with force. And I think you would have to basically become a tyrant in order to fix.
Oh, that's why I said. Yeah, that's why I said I'd have to be king.
Because there's no there is a difference between being a king and being a tyrant.
Yeah. I think
I would love to be king too, but I'd want to be a king that was loved by the people. I wouldn't want to be a tyrant.
I think just simply getting money out of politics would go a long way.
And we've said that 100 times. Or however many episodes we've done on politics, we've said it at least once in each of those episodes.
Probably. But it's true.
And it is 100% true. It is. I think it's the one thing that you and I will never disagree on.
Yeah.
But that's what we were talking about. As far as... I honestly think that the way things are now, as long as it stays this way, that's our best case scenario. I do not see it getting better. I can only see it getting 100% worse. And I honestly think that we could. Best case scenario is it stays the same. I think worst case scenario,
we're watching Rome burn.
We could be facing a second civil war.
Yeah,
I mean that's there. As crazy as that sounds, that's a possibility.
It doesn't sound crazy.
It used to. You would have. If you had said that 30 years ago, I'd have been like, "You're out of fucking mind."
Yeah, I used to laugh at people because I've had conversations when I lived in Tennessee about this.
Yeah. Well, see, they're still trying to fight the last Civil War.
Yeah, but
we're talking about a whole new animal, a whole different thing.
I think lines get drawn on those same lines that they were drawn on.
A lot of those lines, yeah, a lot of those old wounds haven't healed. We'll say.
That's why I've said it before. You know,
There's going to be a lot of new things, too.
I think that I'm sure this is crazy, and a lot of people are going to think this is crazy. And that's maybe it wouldn't have been a bad idea if Lincoln would just let the South leave.
I have come to say that a lot, actually. The downfall is that if we had let them leave, there would have been a whole new country where slavery would probably still, or at least wouldn't have been ended as when it was.
Yeah, correct.
Because the South would have maintained slavery for as long as they possibly could.
Yeah, and they
probably would have
today.
Well, I think
maybe not today, but
I think it would have come to a point where the slaves would have revolted on their own, but it would have probably been in this century rather than last.
Well,
or I'm sorry, last century rather than the one before that. Yeah. So yeah, that's the downside, because when I say that, I know I'm saying that, and I feel that I shouldn't be saying that because I'm endorsing to a degree the continued enslavement of an entire people, and that's the downfall. I think the benefit of ending slavery across the board does outweigh the fact that we're stuck with the South now, but it hurts still.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say the South in total, but of majority of it. And that kind of teases a future episode that we have planned, and that's to discuss whether or not the South really did win the Civil War.
Yeah, because I think there's some argument that even though the great benefit of ending slavery. But see, if you think about it,
let's not go into that, because we're gonna have to discuss that. That will be a future episode of Life in General. Yeah. I was gonna end it there, Ian.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I think we talked at least as much as our experience and understanding.
We went way longer than I thought we would go with this episode. Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, this would be a real quick, like 45-minute show, 50 minutes tops.
It's over an hour, right?
Yeah, it's like an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow, it's almost longer than the last episode.
Yeah, which if you haven't listened to, you should go check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Shameless plug.
And if you have any questions or comments, you can always email us. And that email address is lifeingeneralpod @gmail.com.
Yes.
And if you really want to, you can go on our Twitter account @LIGpod. And we have a Facebook page also.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're going with this.
I'm just fucking with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were expecting me to give the address?
No, I was just repeating what you were saying.
Oh, I thought maybe you were waiting for something.
No. You can always check us on iTunes and Podbean and Spotify and all that stuff.
Yep.
All those places.
Remember, we're as easy to find
as herpes
on a whore.
Yeah, herpes on a whore.
Yes.
And I'm not naming this episode "Herpes on a Whore" because I don't think people will listen.
Well,
to
it was funny after that our little introduction. I threw that out there. I kind of realized that I was being sexist to say whore.
Why?
I should have said herpes on a sex worker because it could be male, female. Whore has the implication of being strictly female because whore is very biblical.
How very fucking social justice.
Well, I'm just pointing out, and God. Herpes on a sex worker. There you go.
You're afraid of offending whores, Ian.
Well, they're people too.
Yes.
I'm
not afraid of offending anyone, really, but
typically I'm not either. But I can tell you, I'm less. I want to offend a whore or a sex worker far less than there's a lot of other people I'd much rather offend a great deal more.
I'm just saying how very leftist of you.
Well, I am.
Lefty Ian.
I'm like a pendulum, but I only stop at the center and move all the way to the left.
You don't stop at the center. You go from like the way left to the not so way left.
I don't think I'm that bad.
You're definitely. I would say you're probably more left than me.
You say that after we spent an hour before recording arguing, and I was arguing on the right of an issue.
Oh yeah.
Considerable right.
We were arguing about unions before, yeah.
And I was I was very
anti-union.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say anti-union. I would say
anti-union.
disgruntled union.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So that's all I got, Ian.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. It's a very awkward way to end the show. Fuck me. All right. Well, until next time.
Yeah. Talk to y'all later and avoid the herpes sex workers. Find the sex workers that don't have herpes.
Peace. And yeah.
Talk to y'all later.
Sorry, sex workers. And
only the ones with herpes. They're the ones that are going to lose out on the business.
And whores.
Whores. God. Talk to y'all later.
We're burning in hell.
Absolutely.
Peace.
Play my role, let me tell you about it. This shit right here, man, I'm about it. Only real niggas reside around me. Yo, old lady, drop a card around me. Dip like I know you can, bitch. Show me the ropes like we in the ring. Got you two cobras, you wanna hang. Shoulder to shoulder, the niggas basic. You know I won't lie. You know that I ain't for that fuck shit. You niggas alright, but I'm way better and she love it. Know that y'all sick as fuck. Here go this tissue, bro. We taking the dub. Hoping you get you some. This hit like a pick me up. She taking my drugs. Know they see the sign. That's some dollar signs. Know they sick as fuck. Know they sick as fuck. Tell them get well soon. Tell them get well soon. Know you sick as fuck. Get well soon.
Oh shit. Watch out, you the God, Billy. Oh shit. Right now, and I'm smiling in your face, bitch. With a gold smile, you should probably make placement to your eye. Niggas sick as fuck. Standing with niggas who down for that party. Who down for some bitches who showing their bodies. Swear to God, nigga, this Molly got me up and running.